Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.
Welcome to the second session of Return to the Essence. Sister Denise is going to focus this session on the topic of what is accurate yoga. As students of Raj Yoga, I'm sure this is a matter of great importance. And I hope that after the session, we'll be able to use this as a reference to assess where we are and what we have been doing so far. So welcome everyone and have a very enlightening session.
Thank you, Sister Rose. The second part of the write-up, continuing from where we were yesterday, it talks about accurate yoga, and Baba used to speak about accurate yoga and what is the difference between accurate and inaccurate yoga. So, for example, on the path of devotion in Hinduism or any other religion, people remember God, and they remember God in all sorts of different ways. And his main interest, as far as I can tell, is for people to know who he is and what he is and what he is like, and so that when you're remembering God, you're remembering God as he is. And occasionally in the Murlis, you will hear him say that there are very, very few who remember me as I am and what I am, or who know me as I am and what I am. And this is why this practice of Raj Yoga is also called Gyan Yoga. That means that the remembrance of God is on the basis of what God says about who he is and what he's like. And, in human relationships, one of the obstacles that people experience is projection. So one person will project their preconceptions about the other person onto that person, and they will not see that person. They will just see what they're projecting onto them. And the same thing happens with God. And all of this is because in the various different religions, they will tell you things about God, which are, as far as they're concerned, true, but as far as God is concerned, they're untrue. And so he says that if you are thinking about me as I am not, then you're not actually connecting with me. Or you may love me as I am not, but it's better if you love me as I am, because that would be real yoga or accurate yoga. And so I want to kind of go through some of these points in the write-up so that we can just take a look at this comparison between accurate yoga and non-accurate yoga. And of course, the yoga is a link between the self and God, which means you have to know yourself accurately as well as know God accurately. And there isn't any single religion which doesn't look at a person in terms of their gender. And he says that if you look at yourself in terms of your gender, well, you're not your gender. There's no such thing as male souls and female souls. That doesn't exist. So if you think of yourself in terms of your gender, already you can't have yoga. You have to be beyond your gender. You can't think of yourself in terms of your culture or your religion or your nationality or any of these factors, because they're all physical. And so one of the problems of conventional religions is they are all physical, and they describe everything in physical terms, even though they're talking about spiritual, but it's not really spiritual, it's still physical. And so the importance of God coming as teacher is to explain the difference between spiritual and physical, between religious and spiritual. And then you can have accurate yoga. So let's take a look at the material here. So this is the thing. Correct information is required if you want to have accurate yoga. And accurate yoga has several elements, and I put down 6. So the first thing is, in terms of yoga, which is a connection between 2 points, and you're one of the points, and God is the other point. So your point of departure is that you affirm that you are a depleted soul. And most people think that their point of departure is to affirm that they are a sinful soul. And when you say that, you're already saying you're bad, you're putting God up very high, you're putting yourself down very far, and the likelihood of connection is very slight. But when you affirm that you are a depleted soul, it simply means that you've run out of gas and you need to fill up. And so this is the important purpose of yoga, is to fill yourself. There are several purposes, but this is one of them, because the energy of the soul is completely depleted by the time you reach the end of the cycle. So it means you have to affirm that you have passed through a possible maximum of 84 births. You could have passed through much less than that, but no more than that. That's the maximum. And also, you're affirming that you declined from an extremely high caliber quality of being in the world remembered as paradise or heaven. You used to live there. And that over time you declined. And so your quality of purity declined. And this is the meaning of Sato Pradhan. So you affirm that you're a depleted soul who has passed through a maximum of 84 births, from golden to silver to copper to iron ages, which means you began Sato Pradhan. So when you started, not when you started your existence, but when you started on the cycle of time, you were Sato Pradhan. And then you decline through Rajo and Tamo to Tamo Pradhan. These are declining state of purity. And you do not decline because you're bad, but you decline because the soul deteriorates due to time. Now, nobody knows this. They all think it's because of being bad. Nobody thinks it's because the soul gets old. And this is because they don't have knowledge about the soul. They don't have knowledge about God. A lot of people think the soul is part of God, and then they make various extrapolations based on faulty premises. So in order to have yoga, you have to have logical, coherent thought, because yoga is based on thought. And it means you need to have correct information, because if you have a premise that's incorrect, then you can't arrive at a conclusion that's correct. So the first thing to understand is that you are currently depleted, but at the same time, you're eternal and immortal. And there is a time and a condition of you that is perfect that you can also relate to. And sometimes he talks about your final condition, your original condition, and your eternal condition. And all of those conditions are the same, which is pure and perfect. But you enter into the cycle of time, you decline. And when you come into the confluence age, which is the period between two cycles, that is the only time when there is progress. That is the only time when you can rise from the completely depleted state to a completely completed state or a perfected state. And that can only happen when God actually comes and interacts with you and shows you how to connect with him as he is and what he is, knowing who you are and what you are. So this is first requirement for accurate yoga. And if you don't start with that, then your yoga will be something else. It'll be maybe you'll have a nice feeling, but having a nice feeling doesn't mean that you're having accurate yoga. And not having a nice feeling also doesn't mean that you're not having accurate yoga, because yoga has nothing to do with feeling. Yet, a lot of people, including Shiv Baba, talk about experience. And experience is important because knowing something, you will not really believe it until you can feel it. And so there is a phenomenon, which is that when you try to meditate based on accurate information, generally speaking, you will get, especially in the beginning, a very, very good feeling. And this is to let you know that you've got it and that this is what it is. But these feelings are there just to let you know that you've got it right. Later on, from time to time, you will have good feelings, but not all the time. And your connectedness is not necessarily supported by a specific feeling, because the purpose of a feeling is to verify that what you know is right. Because what you know is in your intellect and what you feel is in your mind. And any kind of feeling is pretty much physical. And a lot of people think that feelings are spiritual, but they're emotional. And so they're still physical, they're subtle physical. And when you have accurate yoga, you actually do go beyond feeling. But to start with, you very much rely on having good feelings. And if you have a good feeling, you think it's right. And if you have a bad feeling, you think it's wrong. But it isn't necessarily so. The second thing to be aware about is that you have accumulated a lot of karmic debt over many incarnations because you didn't know the philosophy of karma accurately. And obviously, because you must have done a lot of things against your conscience. And there are even people, quite a lot of people, who have done so many things against their conscience that it actually blocks them completely from having a connection with God. And that's very unfortunate. So you have to do a lot of work to break through that. But most people who practice Raj Yoga are people who are quite spiritually minded. They already have love for God and love for humanity. And so their amount of karmic debt rarely is a block to meditation, but I have encountered quite a few who just cannot meditate because of so much negative karma being in the way. So the present time of doing yoga is because you need to remove your karmic debt. So part of yoga is to fill with spiritual power directly from the source, which is incorporeal God. And secondly, you have to accumulate yoga so that you are destroying the negative energy that's filled up your soul due to negative karma. So one is accumulation, and the other is, in a sense, payment of karmic debt. So sometimes you have to do a lot of yoga and you're busy paying karmic debt. So you don't feel that you're accumulating, but you're reducing your debt. So this is very necessary as well. And you can only really have yoga if you know with whom you are having yoga. So this is called yoga with God. And you can't have yoga with God unless you know who is God, where is God, what is God, and all the details about God. And most people, especially people who adhere to the conventional religions, have a concept of God which is man-made. And so it's incorrect, and it's quite physical. Like, for example, there are many people who were taught in their religious education that God is to be feared. So you should be afraid of God because God is dangerous, and God is, likely to not like you or not like what you're doing, and you're not good enough, and all of that stuff, which is absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with God, but everything to do with the patriarchal religions who believe that the more you can diminish a person, the more likely they are to become good. But this is a completely faulty belief. And it makes a person far from God, not close to God. So this is why God is not particularly impressed by the religions, especially not in their current situation, their current format. And this is because the religions at the present time are the way they are because different human men have decided that that's what the religion is. So it may or may not be correct. Mostly it's incorrect. So now the next thing is having a clear concept of who is God, what is God, where is God. So God is a soul, but not a human soul. And it's quite difficult for human beings, even if they're soul conscious, to conceptualize a soul who is not a human soul, who is higher than a human soul. So you need a lot of information. And in the Murlis, every day, he will say various things, and you gradually build up a picture of who is God, all the many, many details. And what is God? So God is not physical. Some religions, they say God is spirit, but then you can't think of spirit. You don't know what spirit is. Maybe you think of steam, or you think of a ghost or something like that. But that's not what it is. That's still physical. So the idea of a point of light which is infinitesimally small and which contains infinite love, wisdom, power, purity, all of these attributes of God are all contained within this tiny point of light, which is not in the physical universe. And so for you to have yoga, you must put yourself on the same level as God. That means that you have to be away from your physical body. and you have to go beyond the material universe in your thinking in order to come to the same dimension as God. So you have to practice that because you're not used to being outside the universe, but you can be, but you can only go there in your thinking. You cannot go there any other way and come back. So even if you're having an out-of-body experience, they're still physical because you're using your subtle body, which is still subtle matter, and it's still not spirit. So where is God? So we have heard about nirvana. It's a well-known expression, but people don't know what that is or where that is. So he talks to us about the three worlds, the material, the subtle, and the incorporeal. And it is not possible to experience the incorporeal world because that is outside the range of the body. But you can think about it. And while in your body, thinking about it accurately, you can encounter it, you can feel it, or feel something like it. But actually, you can't actually feel anything when you are in nirvana. And nirvana is a timeless place. So the being of God knows all things all the time. But a human soul cannot do that. The only time a human soul can know all things is in the confluence age when God teaches you how to spin the cycle of self-realization. And so that requires study, deep study. You can't just grasp it just like that in a second. And even if you do, you still have to go into the depth of it because it's not a simple thing. Now, you also need to know that God is incarnated because it is the end of the cycle. And this is the time when you have to be regenerated, rejuvenated, recreated. And so God comes into interaction and relationship with you through the mind and the intellect. And he speaks and tells all these things through the body of Brahman. Of course, God could transmit thoughts to you, but there's a ton of people who have ideas that, oh, God told me to do this and that, which was completely crazy thing. So in order to protect humanity from that, God has to come into a body and use the mouth and eyes and speak to you, the student, and then you have to think about it and process it. So a very important part of yoga is the study, so that you arrive at connection with God as a result of churning the knowledge. Churning the knowledge means rotating it to a point where your thoughts are all in one direction and they take you to the being of God, whereupon you can become silent and still. But that comes after the process of using thought as an engine to arrive at God, who he is, where he is, or you can say she. He's not a he, not a she. There's no pronoun for God. There's no gender of God. But then God will say, I am your father, your teacher, and your Satguru. So these relationships are significant because of how much influence they have. And he talks a lot about relationship and having relationship with God because relationships are influential. And if you don't have any relationship with anyone, you're very unusual. Normally, people are very influenced by their families, whether they're good or bad doesn't matter, they're influenced. They're very influenced by their education, and they're very influenced by the religious authorities. So these influencers shape a person's thinking and sense of self. So one of the ways in which he teaches is through this concept of relationships to transfer your sense of self from a human origin to a divine origin. And he says, look, these people are not your parents. They are the parents of your body, but I am your mother and father of you, the soul. And your body is not the same as you, the soul. But there's a lot of influence of the body on the soul. And you have to get free from that influence in order to have yoga with God. You're very influenced by your education, because your education tells you what's what. And God says, these people don't know what's what. They know a little bit, but they do not know what you need to know. And so I will teach you about the larger picture of matter and spirit and how you fit in there. And I will teach you karma philosophy correctly so that you can understand how you are, how the world is, what's going on. And don't be under the influence of your worldly education, because it is a form of conditioning that you need to get free from. And then he talks about being the Satguru. So the Satguru is the one who takes you to nirvana, who prepares you for death. And when you are at the end of the time cycle, in addition to filling up your spirit with the energy of God, which gives you enough power to run through the next cycle, and in addition to knowing all things about how the world is and who's what, you also need to know how to go to nirvana, because you need to know how to leave your body for the last time in this cycle, and you have to do it correctly so that you acquire the sanskaras, the characteristics of being able to leave your body at will when the time comes and know what to do, and that you don't take rebirth according to karmic debt, but you take rebirth as a person who is free. And so the way that you leave your body at this time is very important, because this is the time when you can actually get free and actually return to the dimension of nirvana. And then you can come back into a completely rejuvenated world. So you cannot know about this from any other source than God, and you cannot attain this unless your yoga is with God. So this is very important. So when you're sitting in meditation, you're practicing to focus on yourself as a soul and completely free yourself from your body, your bodily identity, your relationships, property, position, mentality, all of these things, and just become a soul alone. And then focus your attention on the being of God as a point of light in the dimension of nirvana. That is accurate yoga, and it's very, very subtle. It's very difficult to do that because you're gross. God is very subtle. You have to make yourself subtle, and doing that is not easy. And keeping your mind still and steady is achieved through this process of churning, because it's a rotation. So this is why you have to study the knowledge of philosophy of karma, the knowledge of the eternally and identically repeating cycle of time. This is necessary because without that, you can't let go. And you can't go beyond the world without letting go of the world. You can't let go of the world because you're bound to it. And the only way that you can unbind yourself from it is by understanding the identical repetition of the time cycle, because you're attached, you're in bondage to the world. And an interesting indication of this is when astronauts go out to outer space, they enjoy looking at the stars and planets and so on, but then they look at the Earth, and their relationship with the Earth is everything that's anything to do with what we know, what we love, everything is there. And so your yoga is with the Earth. And so to break that and let go of that, you have to have your yoga with something else, which is not earthly and not on the earth. And even stars won't work because they're still part of the material universe. So the only thing that will take you out of the bondage to matter and all your karmic bondages is to have yoga with incorporeal God in the world of nirvana. And that takes a whole lifetime to stabilize. So then the next step is to act according to what you know. And one of the big problems is people know everything theoretically. That's easy. But how you function is not according to what you know theoretically. How you function is according to your habits, your conditioning. A lot of unconscious urges make you function in a certain way, which you don't really have much control over. And this is why you get a lot of hypocrisy. People saying one thing and then doing something else. So to make what you say and what you do one thing, you have to live it, you have to be it. And you cannot do that until you are very, very clear about what your bondages are and slowly replace your connections with things of bondage to a connection with the one who is called the liberator. This is another of the names of God, the liberator. This happens best when you have love for God. So if you come to this already having love for God, you're doing well. Because then you're amplifying your love for God and you're making it more focused. Otherwise, generally, people have love for God in an unfocused way, in an emotional way. But love for God, together with knowledge of God and understanding what he's telling, and also love for humanity, and also acting according to the laws of spirituality on the basis of knowing the philosophy of karma, then your karma will be less karma that creates bondage, less and less progressively until there's no karma that creates bondage. And more your karma is with God. So karma creates threads which tie you. And, there is a famous Indian scripture called the Kama Sutra, which is all about lust. And sutra is the threads. So when you take energy from a human being, your bondage is with the human being, with the flesh, with family, with property, with all of these things. You're in bondage because you take energy from them, because this is what you sustain yourself from. And now it's about switching that. And this is why in Raj Yoga you practice celibacy, you have pure food, you are careful about your actions and interactions with people, such that you're not saying one thing and doing something else. And so this is why it's very important to sort of notice the discrepancy within your own self between what you're talking about and how you live and what you're doing. And gradually that discrepancy gets removed. And then the sixth one is that the end result of all of this is that you begin your next time cycle as Vishnu. So Vishnu means that you are the perfected self, you are androgynous, you have these four symbols of Vishnu. One of them is the swastika, which is the symbol of knowing the self. Swa means the self, and astika means knowledge. So knowing all about the self, knowing all your incarnations, and knowing yourself and accepting yourself from the most perfect to the most imperfect. That totality is you. And when you spin the cycle, you are away from the duality of good and evil. And one of the problems of religion is it locks you in the duality of good and evil, whereas spirituality takes you totally beyond that so that you can become just the pure soul and go to God. Nothing is holding you back. The conch shell is that you're able to articulate the knowledge that God gives, and you can process it, understand it, explain it, and live according to it. And then you have the lotus, which means that your karma is with God, and yet you are living in the world, but you are not of the world. So you are detached, loving, but not in bondage to the world. And then you have the mace. And the mace is basically the power to assert who you are and to not allow anyone to have any power over you or any influence over you. And then Vishnu has the double crown, the crown of light, which refers to your spiritual purity, and the crown of jewels, which refers to your knowledge, your understanding, your the state of having absorbed the knowledge that God gives into your intellect, so that you're a person who operates on the basis of the laws of spirituality. And you know very well the difference between religion and spirituality, between culture and spirituality. You are clear, you are the sovereign. So this is what Raj Yoga is all about. Now, if you have yoga with any other force, like the force of matter, which is what happens when you believe God is omnipresent, then you will get spiritual power, but your power will be impure because matter is impure at this time. So any kind of yoga that you do, which includes pranayama or any kind of hatha yoga or any kind of focus on any sort of icon or image or statue or any kind of a religious object or any music or anything physical when you're focusing on a physical thing in a physical way, then the power that you will get will be impure. And so you will get power, but it will not be pure power, and it will not purify you. Now, most people cannot discern the difference between pure and impure power. They just think power. And so if you can't discern the difference, which is very difficult, then you won't consider that there is any difference, but there is. And this is one of the reasons why God says it's very important to know that I am not everywhere. And there's just a lot of people who think that there is this all-pervasive energy, and that is God. And in the Bhagavad Gita, there are lines which say very clearly that God is an all-pervading energy, and he says, I am not. You are misled if you think I am. And that this is one of the points of the Gita which he says are incorrect, and that has been written there by people who believe and who teach that God is an all-pervading energy. And in Christianity, you have the same idea, where there is this statement that God is immanent and transcendent. So immanent means all-pervasive, and transcendent means it's a bit out of your reach, but it's still all-pervasive. That means they still think God is physical, and just because it's subtle, it doesn't mean it's spirit. It doesn't mean it's God. So there are a lot of people who do different kinds of meditation techniques which allow them to make contact with this subtle force, and they assume it's God, but in fact, it's the force of nature or the force of matter. And so you need to know the difference between that if you want to be pure. Now, in the same way, if you have yoga with any founder of any religion, like Christ or Buddha or any other human great soul, you may get spiritual power, but it'll be impure power, because these founders of religions are great souls, but they're human souls, they're not God. And so they reincarnate, and they must reincarnate to sustain their religion. Whether or not the people of their religion believe it doesn't make any difference. They still reincarnate. They still have to sustain their religion, but they decline. And by the time you get to the end of the time cycle, then because the founders of all the religions are themselves in decline and impure, so the religion is also in decline and impure. And this is why it doesn't work. You may get some power, but it'll be impure power. And then if you have yoga with any kind of spirit or any kind of entity, and there's all sorts of, channelers and, people who connect up with this or that soul, and they get all kinds of power, especially there are a lot of healers, different kinds of healing techniques, which involve connecting with a discarnate being, which is also impure. You can get some temporary benefit, but overall it's short-lived, and it's a very declining thing. So it will not work. Now, there's another thing to be aware about, that if you achieve any kind of level of impure power from any of these means, or if you achieve power from yoga with Shiv Baba, but you use it for any other purpose than for purification of your own soul, and dealing with your own negative karma and exams, or for any purpose that Shiv Baba requires of you specifically, then your power will be impure power, or your power will be contaminated by your impure ambitions. So this is something that only Raj Yogis can get into this problem. So you have to watch out what you're doing with your power. Because the laws of spirituality are very clear that you are not permitted to use your power for, becoming famous or rich or important or whatever, which you could do if you wanted, but that would contaminate the power. And the purpose of the power that you are drawing into yourself is very specific. And it is for the purification of your own soul. So any other reason will contaminate it. And when you're busy purifying your own soul, that means all sorts of impurities are coming out. And you have to be very patient with that. And you have all sorts of negative karma, which will bother you. And you have to recognize it and understand it and get on with the purifying, purging process. And there are also exams. And a lot of the exams will make you lose confidence, make you doubt yourself, make you not understand what's going on. So you have to get through that and use your power for that. And this is why your spiritual power is very much based on knowledge, because if you know the knowledge well, you'll be able to discern what's happening, what kind of exams are going on, and you'll be able to deal with it. And, sometimes he says, you are my instruments. And so anytime, if he wants, he can get something done through anyone. And you need to have a certain amount of power. If you don't, he will supply the power to get something done through you. But otherwise, he also gives you duties, and you must use your power to fulfill those duties. And if you try and do something which is just for temporary self-aggrandizement, then that will contaminate you. And then you will not achieve the status of Lakshmi and Narayan. So the status of Lakshmi and Narayan doesn't really have much to do with being a master of the universe, although you will be, but you won't know, because you will have left your body, gone to nirvana, come back to the world. You will have no idea about any of this. You will be just like a blank sheet of paper, and you'll be very lovely, very beautiful, very wealthy, very talented, but completely ignorant about God, completely ignorant about the past. And that's how it is. And this is why the present birth is really much more interesting, because you know everything. And because you know everything, you can go in your mind to any part of the cycle and understand slowly, gradually, the totality of yourself. And that is very extraordinary and fascinating practice. So if you do contaminate your yoga power, then you will get into some sort of debt, because you can have karma with people, but you can also have karma with God. And if you have negative karma with God, because you have done something against him knowingly, because of your ambitions or because of any other such thing, you have to pay for that. And that takes some form of settlement of karma. And settlement of karma is a very much what yoga is also for. So let's take a look at the next slide, and we'll look at the settlement of negative karma. So the settlement of karma takes place in different contexts, and one is different kinds of war. And mostly, for most people, it's the inner war, because you want to go one way and your negative karma pushes you in another way. And then you have an internal battle going on. But there's external battles as well. And you may be in a family which is very much against your spiritual development or against you attaining your freedom, and then they will give you a hard time. So you're in a war situation there. You may be in a war situation in your place of work. You may be in an actual war situation because there are many parts of the world where there are actual conflicts going on. Or you may be in a part of the world where there are gangs and it's very unsafe. And so you're in a war zone, even if it's not a war between countries or something like that. So there are plenty of war zones around, and you have to endure that, be there, and get through it. You also have different karmic accounts to settle. So over the course of many years, many incarnations, you have had interaction with people. And when you have done things that are against the proper use of karma philosophy, then you go into debt. And when you go into debt, you may get away with it in your lifetime, but that's it. You will not escape. It will be there to haunt you, and you will have to suffer in different ways. It can be through mental illness, it can be through physical illness, it can be through all kinds of ways in which you have to settle your karma. And when you're spiritually quite sensitive, you will have an intuitive feeling that what's going on is you're settling karma. You may be in difficult circumstances, which is not settlement of karma, but which is something that's there to harden you, to strengthen you, to make you more resilient. And that's nothing to do with settlement of karma, even if it's hard. Another kind of context is your role. So your role with the other Raj yogis, your role with your people at home, at work, your role may put you in a situation where things are really difficult. And so that can be a context. And there are many other contexts as well. And the way in which you settle karma is pain. And it could be physical, or, and this is just taking a look at the next slide. Pain comes in different forms: physical, emotional, psychological, social, financial, all sorts of pain, difficulty, hardship. And it's also good to be aware that nothing is as it seems, because you usually assume everything is what it seems to be, but it's sometimes something quite different, because you need to be able to discern what's really going on and know the difference between what seems to be going on and what's actually going on. And it's a very, very important exam to acquire the power to discriminate what's going on independently of your sense perceptions. So a yogi means someone who knows what's what by knowing rather than by seeing, hearing, touching, all of these sense perceptions. And when you're assessing a relationship or a situation, you assess it on the basis of what it appears to be. And so this exam is to look beyond appearances and see what's really going on. That's very important. You will have to deal with opposition from various toxic drives or desires. And these are always called the 5 vices of greed, anger, lust, attachment, ego. So everyone who comes to Raj Yoga comes with body consciousness. And for many, many births, you have been operating on the basis of materialism, negative emotions, and trying to feed your soul from physical sources. And then you get in bondage with them. You get into addictions. There are other more subtle, toxic, motivating emotions like low self-esteem, narcissism, jealousy, hatred, doubt, fear, and so many others. So these emotions that you feel, they're motivating forces, and you act on the basis of how you feel. And the yogi will accumulate power, and this power reconnects you with your essential qualities. So the essential qualities of the soul is purity, peace, power, love, bliss, things like this. And so instead of restraining yourself from being motivated by negative emotions, you are connecting yourself more and more with higher qualities, which releases you from the bondage of these emotions and motivating desires that put you in bondage and put you into karmic debt. So you have to deal with that. You also have to deal with the pairs of opposites. One of the attributes of a Raj Yogi is to be in a state of equilibrium in the face of the pairs of opposites. And this is one of the very famous quotes from the Gita, that a yogi is somebody like this. And so as you progress with your spiritual practice, you will encounter fame and defamation, and you have to be the same in the face of fame and the same in the face of defamation. So it's very easy to be fine when everybody thinks you're wonderful, but to be equally fine when everybody thinks you're no good, that takes more effort. But that's part of the practice, because what you are is on the basis of what you know you are, not on the basis of what other people project onto you. So it's very much a practice about staying free from these projections. And success and failure, you see, if you're successful, you'll be smiling. If you fail, you will be frowning. And equilibrium means that success doesn't go to your head and failure doesn't put you down. You take the rough with the smooth, and you are stable and steady in the middle of all that. The environment can be hot, can be cold, can be nice, can be nasty, can be rich, can be poor. All of these environmental circumstances, you're the same in the midst of that. It doesn't make any difference to you. Sickness and health. Can you be feeling okay about yourself on the basis of what you know about yourself, even if you're sick. And this is quite a big test, but it is there. So Raj Yoga is actually a form of competition. And you're not competing against other Raj Yogis, you're competing against yourself. Because your current self is quite a different being, in a way, than what your essential self is. And you're constantly trying to become your essential self, but your current self keeps on getting in the way of it and saying, actually, this is me. This is the real me. And you're saying, okay, you're the current me, but I'm connecting with my essential self, the eternal me. It's also a test. So there are many elements of study, and these are the instruments which assist you in grasping the study. So we have the original pictures, which give you the full picture of what everything is and who you are in relation to everything, just in one picture. So the cycle, the tree, the Trimurti, Lakshmi Narayan, this is the iconography that gives you the whole thing in different pictures. All pictures say the same thing, but in a different way. And in order to grasp the study as a whole, if you work with the pictures, that helps you a lot, because you're seeing all things just in one icon, one picture. Normally, the way people learn to think in their material consciousness is you just work with little tiny pixels. you think if you can understand one little bit, that's good enough. But in Raj Yoga, you must always see every piece in the context of the whole, and make yourself able to stay connected with the whole, because this is what enables you to be a master. And this is what enables you to keep everything in perspective. If you lose perspective, you lose your stability. When you keep perspective, you keep your stability. So this is very important. And the aim of all of this is so that you can grasp and conceptualize immortality and eternity. That's not easy. And it is said that the one thing that people want is immortality. And wanting immortality is something that desire, you can fulfill that desire by really understanding these things and studying these things and practicing these things. So to be a Raj Yogi is actually the very best thing of all, because this is what you get. You get clarity about your immortality and your eternity. And with that, you are in a stable stage. So I think that I will stop there. There's quite a bit more that we have in the write-up, but I'm going to move that to our next session. And let me take it back to Sister Rose. Thank you, and Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. So before we move on to the discussion, again, may we request you to lead us, guide us to a very practical steps in what you have just talked about.
So we have been talking about accurate yoga, which is everything to do with the point. being the point, and the expansion of the point is the whole cycle. Your destination is the point of God, the incorporeal one, in the dimension of nirvana. And you want to be stable and steady in a state of equilibrium in the face of all things. Ultimately, to be, to become, and to understand what it is to be immortal. To grasp the eternity of your existence, no end, no beginning. To be comfortable with going through the cycle of good and bad, up and down, the beauty and the ugliness, all of it. You manage it. It's all included in this cycle, which, when you rotate, everything merges into light. And the light itself merges into a point of light. A point of light of you, letting go of everything to do with the world. And connecting with the point of light of the One. Then you arrive at stillness, silence, acceptance. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Already a lot of comments coming in, expressing their appreciation for the clarity of this class. And one said that this is a master class and a must class for BKs who are interested to have accurate yoga.
Good. Okay, that's nice. Thank you very much for that.
So before I ask some questions, there is a comment here from yesterday's session, which I would request Maggie to share in the screen and request you, Sister Denise, to read as there are some Hindi words.
Okay, yesterday Sister Denise mentioned Oppenheimer quoting a line in the Gita, and it is said that Kal is misinterpreted as death in that sentence. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. Main pralay ka moola karan aur mahakal hoon jo jagat ka sanhar karane ke liye aata hoon. It is that, you see, Mahakal means the great death, Mahakal. And you see, it is said actually not just only in India, but in other religions and spiritual practices that God is death. And this is one of the reasons why people are afraid of God. Because, you know, when you die, you go to God, so God will come and get you and take you away, or God has taken away my child or my mother or my father. So And there is a temple in India, a very famous temple called Mahakaleshwar, which is the temple to Shiva as the Great Death. And it's very important to understand Great Death means that all of humanity, except for a few, at a certain point in time, will leave their bodies all at once, all together. And they will do this with the assistance of nuclear bombs, because when you, if you think about the nuclear war, which people don't think about it in any other way except with absolute terror, but you also have to think about it in a dispassionate way, because the quantity of nuclear bombs and the quality of nuclear bombs that are available, and there are at least 5 who are allowed to have nuclear bombs, countries, and there are others who are not allowed to have them, but who have them anyway. And so if you would let off all those bombs all at once, and they are designed in such a way that if you let off one, there'll be another one who'll come along and knock it out, and then they'll probably both explode. But if you send off all of them all at once, that's a pretty big explosion, which is big enough to destroy the bodies of a large proportion of humanity, if not almost all of it, maybe 99% or something like that. And they can't reincarnate when you do that, you see. And that's an important point. Because there is another function of God, which is, I am here to take everyone back to the world of nirvana. And I take everyone like a swarm of mosquitoes. And I will be like a queen bee, who goes off in a bee swarm, and all the other bees follow the queen. And he says that at the end of the cycle, this is what happens. I'm here as the Great Death to liberate all of you from your physical bodies, and I will take you all back to nirvana, because at the end of the cycle, that's what happens. And of course, people are very much conscious of mortality. They want to be immortal, but they are mortal. And so they are absolutely terrified by death. The worst thing you can do to someone is kill them. I think it's a maximum punishment for killing people. And then you see God is not supposed to go around killing people, because then you can't love God or somebody who will kill everybody. So it's very confusing for people. And I think what's important is to understand that when you reach the end of the time cycle, that means it's the end of your cycle of reincarnations, and the whole world and whole of humanity has to get recreated. And people, they think creation happens once, and then here we are, we're created, and that's it. We just stay like that, but it's not like that. And in India, the idea of the Trimurti, which is different from the Christian Trinity, is that God is the creator, sustainer, and destroyer. And he says, I'm not the destroyer, but I do carry you home. But that doesn't mean I destroy you. I just carry you back to nirvana, which is what you wanted in the first place. Or he says sometimes, look, in all your prayers and so on, you're asking me to take you to nirvana. You want to go to nirvana. You want to be pure, and the implication of that is I have to free you from the impure body and the impure world, take you back to the soul world and reset everybody, fill them all with power and wisdom, and then you want him to send you to heaven, but he can't send you to heaven without, first of all, doing these other things. And so this is the difficulty. You see, people have a very incomplete ability to deal with God because of the consciousness of mortality, which is called the body consciousness. But I think, to me at least, when you really go into the depth of what it means to be a soul, then you become aware of your immortality, and that's theoretical, right? But then you have to make it from theoretical to be real. And that means you must not be afraid of your death or anybody else's death. And so that's a difficult one. But in the Gita, it says over and over again, that the soul cannot be destroyed, and you are the soul. But because people identify with the body, and the whole culture, religion, everything is all about how death is bad, and we have to avoid it. And the whole medical profession is based on preventing people from leaving their bodies except at the last resort, in which case they say they failed. But you see, death is part of life. And for that, you must understand reincarnation. So as long as you have a religion which says there's no such thing as reincarnation, death becomes a problem, because it means you stop existing. And this statement, which is what Oppenheimer had said, this he saw with the nuclear bomb. This is what the Gita is talking about. And there are enough nuclear bombs to destroy the world 20, 30 times over. You only need to do it one time, but we have a lot. And when you detonate all these bombs, what do you think is going to happen to the mantle that covers the magma that's on the inside of the earth? It's going to get disturbed. You're going to have incredible cataclysmic activity on the earth. And all of this is so scary that people just don't want to include it as something that is manageable and something that they have to go through. And so slowly, we need to put ourselves in front of this idea in the consciousness of being an immortal soul to be able to accept it and let it happen as and when it happens. This is the awful truth, which nobody wants to hear about. What to do? But God says, anyway, I know my job. I have to do this. I have to tell you about it. And I have to get you to be conscious of your immortality and of everybody else's immortality. Because just you being immortal is not enough. You have to really be able to allow this great death and rebirth of all humanity and all of the planet. And it can't happen until people agree to it. This is another spiritual law. You won't agree to it if you don't agree. So, that's the thing.
To repeat what you just said, it won't happen until all people agree to it.
And this is something that Baba had said when talking about this final moment in the cycle. He says it won't be done until every last human being wants it. That means circumstances have to be pretty bad. Mm-hmm. We're already in quite bad circumstances, and there are people talking about how the world is irreversibly gone into a different state that we don't know what to call it even, because the world as we knew it sort of somehow stopped around the time of COVID. And then when we all got back from being look down is a different world, and getting more and more different every day, more and more difficult, very difficult. And so you need strength. And I think this is the importance of having a strong connection with God, is that you could get enough strength to get through the difficulties that are coming along.
So the context in which people will agree to it is due to the severity of the situation all around the world.
I think so, yeah, because as long as it's bad for somebody else but not bad for you, you won't agree. But if there's, great difficulties for absolutely everyone, what will they say? They'll say, get me out of here. Mm-hmm. Oh, God, take me away. And he will say, okay, I will do that.
In this connection, I remember a BK years ago who was going through a very serious physical illness. And she was saying that in her mind, oh, Baba, take me from this pain. And you kind of said that a better way is to say that, Baba, I am now coming to you.
Yeah. Yes.
And this actually makes a lot of difference even in one's feeling and attitude and consciousness. It's like automatically it brings about dignity in the self.
The thing is that you don't know if you are afraid of death or not until you have a direct encounter with it. And I think that there are more and more people who are having close encounters with death or near-death experiences. And I have also experienced this. And that's the only time when you know whether or not you're really afraid of death. And in my situation, surprise, surprise, I was not afraid. I was totally ready. But then I got this kind of intuitive thought that, okay, yeah, you can come, but it's not time yet. So off we go and keep going. And fine. And after that, I just knew, okay, whenever it comes, but I'm ready anytime.
In another topic, one of the things that have also struck me very deeply is many years ago when I heard you talk about this bad, that versus weak. And there's a very big difference between the soul being weak and not bad. I mean, because we are so conditioned to look at everything, including the self and others, as good or bad. And to think rather than, it's just a weak soul who is depleted and needs to fill up. And then again, it takes away the judgment. It takes away this a lot of biases and prejudices.
Yeah, but it's very difficult for people when they see somebody doing things which are really, really bad, torture and murder and all of this, because you can't really deal with it. It could be you, or it could happen to you. And people are so much, as you say, conditioned. But yet, when God is talking to us, he says, you need to know that the reason anyone does an action that's against their conscience is because they don't have the power to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And then look at yourself when you're in the face of some situation, and it does happen. Okay, you're a good person, you only do the right thing, but then something comes along where you're in a situation and you are told, like this happens to people in the workplace, you are told you have to do this, otherwise you get fired. And if you don't want to do it, then you have to accept that you will not have work and that you will be looked upon as a bad person by the community and. And so you have to be much stronger than all the so-called good people if you want to be really live according to your principles and according to your conscience. And this is something that happens when people are in circumstances of war, you see. And they very often find themselves having to do something that is unconscionable, including torture and stuff like that. And I mean, in the Second World War, for example, I know of some of the, in Germany, people who were part of the SS who needed to torture people. And many of them, they rather commit suicide than do that. And there was no other way. If you didn't want to do it, there was no option other than to commit suicide. And so they did. And this is a very, very difficult situation to be in. And if you do what they want you to do, then you corrupt your soul, you sell your soul, you get corrupted, and you can be used for all sorts of really awful work. And a lot of people go down that road because if you don't do it, you need a lot more strength to not do it than to do it. But of course, it'll cost you a lot either way. And so sometimes I have said that, if you want to do the right thing, it's going to cost you a lot. But people believe that it doesn't cost you anything to do the right thing. That's a completely false statement. It costs you a lot.
Mm.
That's the way it is.
Okay, Sister Denise, let me read the comments. In Raj Yoga, we are told of a static nirvana where Shiv Baba and the purified souls are in a vegetative state. However, it seems that Shiv Baba escapes from this static nirvana from the Copper Age onwards, for he leaves this vegetative state and begins to return to the path of devotion. It is as if he passes into a dynamic nirvana. If he tells us that we are equal to him, how can he be conscious and active in nirvana and we are not? Could you clarify?
Well, I think the person who has stated this has not got it right. There's no such thing as a vegetative state unless you're in your body. You can't be vegetating in the soul world. When it is said equal to God, this is a translation issue. You cannot be equal to God. You can be equally incorporeal. You can be equally a soul, but you cannot be God. So in that sense, you cannot be equal to God according to the meaning of the English language. But there's a lot of translation issues because of these kind of finer points of meaning. Shiv Baba is the only soul who is always conscious in nirvana. And no other soul is conscious unless they're in their body. And that's what makes God a non-human soul. And when you, as most people do, evaluate God on the basis of human criteria, then you haven't understood. So you can't make somebody understand if they don't understand. You understand something that you didn't understand before by really looking at the knowledge itself, not what people say about the knowledge. And when you use these syllogisms, if then, a lot of time, including in this particular statement, you're using incorrect premises, and therefore you arrive at incorrect conclusions. And so all I can say is, you have to go back to the drawing board and understand that you cannot judge God and get away with it. It's not going to work. You don't know what you're talking about.
And I think for many, again, as I said, to listen to this session, not just again, but many times, will be very, very useful, Sister Denise. In one of the Murli notes that you have written, you also talk about yoga and, in a sense, what is not yoga, and to be careful in selecting the aids that we use in yoga. For example, music, to also be very selective in that, because oftentimes we can get caught up with the nice music and have good feelings and assume that we are having good yoga or we are enjoying good yoga. But it is not really having yoga. It's just enjoying the music.
Yeah. The thing is, there are many levels of doing this. And there are many, I think the overwhelming majority of people who are in this practice of Raj Yoga are doing it from the perspective of a devotee. And although there is a difference between Gyan and Bhakti, for many people, they don't really make that distinction. And just like in any religion, you use theater and music and so on because it does and can very easily bring you to a cathartic experience. And that's okay. But if you want to practice yoga at the level that I'm talking about, then you need to be attentive to what you're doing. And if you find yourself, just listening to the music and thinking you're having good yoga, then you're deluding yourself. Then you have to, again, go back to the drawing board and do it at a higher level. But you see, because there's so many people doing it on so many different levels, you can only really talk about your own self. Say, okay, at which level do I want to do this? So I say, well, don't just listen to the music unless you can't do otherwise,
Sister Denise, in a BK gathering during meditation, there's usually somebody conducting meditation. What is really supposed to happen between the one sitting in front and those, in class?
Well, this system of having somebody conducting it is based on the idea that the people who are sitting in the class don't know how to meditate, and the person who's conducting does, and is a good meditator and will help them to hold their attention in a focused way. And that's what that's about. But you see, gradually it just becomes like a ritual to have it like that. And the person conducting isn't necessarily a better yogi than the people sitting, and the people sitting don't necessarily not know how to do yoga. They know perfectly well how to do yoga. So you don't really need somebody sitting, but then people like to have it that way. And so they do. But, again, you have, if a lot of people do these things in a ritualistic or devotional way, because that's what they like, so they do that. But for me, I'm somebody who likes the solitary yoga. And it's an individual thing, but it's very helpful for people who don't know how to hold their mind steady.
You mentioned that to keep your perspective is to keep your stability, and the perspective being that I am immortal. And
really, no. If you can hold in your mind and intellect the totality of what is called the reality, all of which is contained in the cycle, you see the biggest of all big pictures. That's called perspective, not just any perspective. Now, once you have that perspective, automatically what comes with it is you get it that you're immortal.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you see the whole and you see that it's an identical repetition, and you see the material, the non-material, and the subtle, you see the whole thing, you're getting the same angle on reality as God, which is why he's giving it to us, so that you can do it. And some people can do it, but not everybody. It's quite an extraordinary thing to do. And there are a lot of people who think, well, anybody can do this because this is easy Raj Yoga, therefore. And these are incorrect syllogisms, wrong premises. Raj Yoga is the most difficult thing there is. And you can do a few things. And if you persist and you study and you practice, you can go a very long way. Anybody can go a very long way, but there are obstacles. And just like in any race, sometimes Baba compares it to a race, a horse race. Some people run the full length, some people don't. You have a marathon, not very many people get to the end of it. And somebody's first, somebody's second, somebody's third, like that. But if you want to, run the whole length, you have to be fit and strong and handle the obstacles. And that's how it is.
Be ready.
Anybody can start, and you can do it. But then, why I'm telling these things in this way is to encourage people to think that you will not just do everything on one level forever. You'll get fed up with that because you've been there, done that, got all the T-shirts. Now you want to go to another level. And all of us who've been doing this for a long time, there have to be obstacles. You have to get blocks. You have to push through them, and you find yourself on another level. And as long as you keep going, that is the process. You will get blocked. You will get through the blocks, and you'll keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very individual as well. There's no such thing as one size fits all, except at the very beginning.
That's why I read one of the comments in the Facebook of the EGY, and it says, after listening to your session, it gives her, like hope. And she said, how I wished I had knew this years ago, because again, the encouragement, like on one side is the reality, and you say it as it is, and yet somehow it gives me and that person and a few others, the encouragement, that hope to just keep going. and be able to look at these obstacles somehow in a different way. Another thing I think that is striking is, again, when you said that it's very important to go beyond feelings in yoga.
It's very important because there are many occasions where you have a bad day, or you can't connect, or you feel bad, or you lose hope, or whatever, because of how you feel. And this is why this is sometimes called yoga of the intellect, in the sense that what you know to be true, like 2 + 2 is 4, whether it's day or night or raining or sunny, or, it's a war or peace, or it doesn't change that 2 + 2 is 4. And in the same way, your feelings are all sorts of things. Every color, every type of feeling you go through, but it doesn't change the fact that you're a child of God, you're an immortal soul, you have the possibility of connecting. And so these feelings don't prove or disprove anything, and you need to know that. And if you limit yourself to how you feel, then you are under the influence of sense perception, which are classified in the Gita as delusional. You look at a person when they're 2 years old or 20 years old or 100 years old, they're going to look different because they get old. Same person. Deterioration of the body, And a person who's sick or a person who's well is very different, but it's the same person in different circumstances. So you need to apply the knowledge to stabilize yourself at times when you're feeling bad, and not assume that if you feel bad, it proves or disproves anything. It doesn't prove or disprove anything. It just is something to get through. It's like weather, internal weather.
Thank you very much for that. Sister Denise, is a question from Vanji. The status of Lakshmi and Narayan is for only a few souls. Does that imply that most who attain godly, pure power through yoga have misused that power?
Well, not necessarily. It might be in some cases, but you need to decide for yourself what is your relationship with the idea of Lakshmi and Narayan being your aim and object of Raj Yoga. So it is true that these are the emperor and empress of the golden age, but by the time they take birth, they will not remember any of this. They will not know who they were or anything about it. They will just appear in the world of heaven as the emperor and empress, and they really won't know how they got there or why. So in that case, you say, okay, I want to be Lakshmi and Narayan. So the meaning of these words, Lakshmi and Narayan, Lakshmi means a person who has the qualifications. The Lakshan are the signs. So do you have the signs of purity, the signs of virtue, the signs of strength? Are you, when you look at yourself, are you empowered? Are you virtuous? And if you are, then you are reaching your aim as Lakshmi. And then Narayan means the man of truth. So are you walking your talk? Are you not hypocritical? Are you being true to yourself? And if you take it in that way, there's a very, very meaningful way of going to this aim and object of Lakshmi and Narayan. And if you do that, chances are you might well end up as the emperor of the universe, but you will never know. but at least you will be knowing that you are doing your best and you are a person of honor, and you're authentic, you know.
Mhm.
And I think that's what this is really all about.
Again, very useful description of Lakshmi and Narayan.
Well, I mean, you're not here to have lots of money. That's not the idea. You're not, although we hear about all the things that there are in the golden age, and it's high-tech place, and all the people have their own airplanes, but they're quiet ones, and everything is in harmony, and all these things. That's very nice, but you're not going to get that in this life. And you're not going to know when you have that anything about this life. So this is why I think it's more realistic and reasonable to look at what it means to go for that aim and try to have that in this life, and not really be concerned if you've got all the gold and you know, endless fruit trees and all this type of thing, you know. That's not really what it's about.
Can I just ask one more question before we finish? Because again, it's something you said in the beginning, that you have to know yourself accurately and know God accurately. And knowing the self important to know God accurately also?
Well, I think it is very important because like if you know, one of the meanings of ego is inferiority and superiority. So if you think you're better than what you are, that won't work. If you think you're less good than what you are, that won't work. To be able to know yourself as you really are, that's very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's difficult to perceive yourself as a being. And so it takes many years, I think, to grasp what am I and who am I. But gradually you do build up a picture of what you are in terms of your character and what you stand for. And your conscience is the key reference, I think, because when you live according to your conscience, it'll let you know if you're not in line, you know, and if you're out of order. And you to have a connection with God, you really need to be on the same level. So you need to be in your full self-honor and self-respect. So you're not either having an arrogant attitude towards God and judging him according to human criteria, which is not a good way to come into contact, or you think of yourself as so low that you don't allow yourself to be on that level. And I think, you know, it's important to understand that Raj Yoga is a whole life journey. It's not over yet. And from time to time, you have to completely rethink what it means, because it's not just a smooth road. It's not a straight road. You have to go through many levels, and you get blocks and you move the blocks. You have to go from one level to another to another. You don't know how many levels there are. And it's just, I think, quite difficult to put it in a way which is really limits it. You know what I mean? Life is a journey. Raj Yoga is life. And at the end of it, you will die. And you need to know that this is a preparation for death, this whole thing.
Okay.
There's a very nice thing in the Gita, which I'm just thinking, I just want to share with you. It says that anything that's dead will come alive, and anything that's alive will die. And that's important to know. Or anyone who's dead will come alive, and anyone who's alive will die. And that also helps you to understand your immortality. And it's not a physical thing.
Thank you so much, Sister Denise, for another session that is very enlightening, enriching, very relevant, and very useful. Thank you so much.